Okay, so we are live with Vadim. Vadim is currently the founder of CoSquare. He has founded multiple other startups as well. CoSquare is an organization that helps startups get incorporated. It's a platform that really helps entrepreneurs incorporate and register their business. So anyways, happy to have you, Vadim. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Rez, and big shout out to you and the community that obviously you're organizing and the podcast that you're running for putting this together. I think there's going to be a lot of value that we can create and share, through this conversation. So I'm excited to be part of it. Thanks for having me.
Of course, looking forward to it, and thank you for joining me. So, for audience, who are you? Who is Vadim? What's your story, Vadim?
Yeah, it's thank you so much for asking. And based on my Eastern European name and probably the thick accent, you could probably guess that I'm not originally from Canada or from North America. Grew up and I was raised in Ukraine, which is a post-communist, post-USSR country, and immigrated here when I was 17. My parents decided, and alongside with me, that it was a good time and a good opportunity to maybe change locations. And so we scraped enough money to for me to come to Canada and study here. And so when I was 17, I moved from Ukraine, settled down. Really taught myself how to speak proper English. I mean, I could speak a little bit here and there, but there is no amount of preparation that can ever really match the real life circumstances and you talking to real people and being all nervous about putting two words together. So, kind of went through that. And then, graduated, at top of my class, went on to, work on Bay Street for all the Canadians, probably sure, I'm sure you know that Bay Street is sort of like a Wall Street here in Canada. So I worked in wealth management, and I aspired to be an investment banker. And then one day I just decided not to. It just kind of happened to me that, I wasn't going to grow into a portfolio management role or become a hedge fund manager. I wanted to start something else. I wanted to have my own business. And so when I finally got my permanent residency in Canada, got my track to become a citizen, I just decided it was the right time for me to play around and experiment with different business ideas. And so I ended up quitting, taught myself how to code, again just by teaching myself different modules, and then went on to start multiple businesses over the past 7 years. So that's a very short elevator pitch that I usually give to people that I meet at the conference or over cocktails. And again, before COVID, I was a little bit more sharp on this pitch because I had to do a lot of startup events and just business meetups. And these days it's more by email because you usually introduce yourself by email. So, but that's how I introduce myself.
Yeah, man, COVID definitely did make our social skills a little more blunt. Having been at home for so long, I really forgot how to socialize with people, to be honest. Really, really interesting. I am curious to know about, a lot of things through your startup career and building a lot of different, companies and products. And right now, your current, organization, CoSquare. But before all of this, I was curious to know, you mentioned Bay Street. So why did you leave? What was the trigger for you to actually leave that position?
I was in this same very room. I was standing in this very room where I'm recording this podcast right now. I was looking outside the window. It was 5 years ago or so. And I just realized that I don't want to do this track. It's kind of like they tell you to put your head down and work hard, and eventually you'll come out on the other side successful as a successful individual. And I think I got my head up a little bit earlier, fortunately for me, because I had an opportunity to look around, and then I realized I'm not on the right track. I'm playing the game, but not the game that I want to be. I want to play soccer, but I'm playing hockey. It's amazing. I'm doing well, but I'd rather be on the grass field than on the ice. If that analogy makes sense to you. So, you can be putting 40, 80, 60 hours a week, and you could be successful at anything. My question was, am I in the right place? And really came back, came down to, my parents really wanted me to have security. And, as an immigrant from a communist country, you're not thinking about starting your own business as much as just making a living. And even though both of my parents were very entrepreneurial and they had to survive, they didn't want the same journey for me. They wanted more secure, more predictable, and I understand that. I love them for them. I love them for that. But at some point, I realized, look, there is no reason for me not to try. I mean, I'm always going to get back to Wall Street or Bay Street, and even Wall Street, because I was at that time looking into more of a like Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs and all that. So, I realized, let me go and try. And if I fail, 3 years later, I'll just continue on the CFA route. For those of you who don't know, CFA is the, designation that you usually take when you want to, work in investment banking or finance. It's, what
And
makes
it's
you.
it's not easy at all.
It's really hard because it's 3-part course. You have you have to essentially take 3 courses, but the first one is okay. Second one is incredibly hard. The third one is a little bit easier. And then you can finish the whole thing in a year and a half, or some people take as long as 5-10 years to finish it, because really you're competing against other, overachievers in the financial industry that want to make it to the top. So you're competing with, other portfolio managers, and they only accept that many people every year. So there's a natural exclusion or natural sort of elimination that occurs when, you're only, you're doing well, but other people do better. So then they end up, being, they end up passing, and then you end up sort of, just being at the bottom of the list, relatively speaking. So yeah, ridiculously incredible, tough course. But I always knew that, coming back from just working hard and building my own business, like if anything, I can learn about technology, I can expose myself to a different industry. I was always passionate about technology technology and coding and development, and because I knew that the future is in technology. And growing up, I was a business kid, so I didn't have any technical skills. I didn't complete the CS degree. Like I didn't have any background in building, programming, developing, none of that. And so I was always afraid that that's going to hold me back in the future, that when I decide to do something in technology, I'm just not going to have the chops to do it. So I forced myself to really dive into it and understand what it takes to build a website, build a mobile app, and then never looked back. It's the most valuable skill set I've learned in my life. And I encourage anybody that's listening or thinking about, really advancing themselves professionally, is to pick up programming, whether you're in finance, technology, consulting, what have you. It's an amazing benefit to you professionally. So
yeah, that's interesting. You say that. I always give the same advice to people, but I don't tend to follow that myself when it comes to coding. I mean, my background is in industrial engineering, so definitely some technical aspects to it, but never really gravitated towards towards that language. So I got a question. I'm curious, since you changed your path and you wanted to play football, not really hockey, right? So a lot of people are in that place where they're comfortable, they're working, they're getting that cash flow in, and they're good at what they're doing, but not necessarily passionate about it, don't really feel like it's their calling. They just get up and make themselves go to work. And thinking about switching or going for that dream or that hunch that they have is a scary thing for them. So what would you say to those people? I mean, how did you end up getting past that fear and launching yourself out of your comfort zone?
So it's an amazing question. Amazing. I love you for asking me that question. Thank you so much. I got a perfect answer for you. What I did does not apply to a lot of people for one reason. I was young. I was 20 years old. I was single, and I had no debt. No kids, no family, just me. Whatever I want to do, I can do it. So don't follow this advice if you're not in that situation, okay? If you're family, you've got mortgage commitments, you've got tuition that you want to accumulate for your kids, please don't follow this advice. But there is an alternative, and I'll share that as well. But for me, it was just really, why not, right? Just jump in, try it. There is, I don't believe in being half pregnant on, trying and kind of trying, but kind of not trying, because, back to your point, you're not following your own advice. It's very easy to not follow through on your part-time ambition if where the results isn't your full-time job. Because you're putting in 2 hours, you're making $80, but over here you're putting in 100 hours, you're not making any money for the longest time. Back to, even like we started this call before the recording, you asked me how I'm doing. I said, I'm doing a lot of preliminary work right now and not necessarily getting results today, but that's okay. That's part of a journey. It's, laying the foundation. You're not necessarily creating apartments, but you're creating that concrete foundation to start laying apartments on top of that, and eventually becomes a condominium building. It's very easy to get caught up in the, input-output disproportionality of being an entrepreneur. You're not necessarily getting results right away. So it's very, and that's why I wanted to jump in, because I realized I'm never going to do, I'm never going to give my absolute best to something that I'm not fully committed to. So, whether that's being financially committed or from a time perspective, like I just want to have that at the top of my mind, where I know I wake up and that's what I do. And that's why I did it. And I don't regret doing that. With that said, if you are in the current role and you're maybe in the senior management, or you got commitments in terms of family and kids and just other financial commitments, my recommendation is really create that layer of discipline where you come home at 6 and you're not letting yourself relax. The day's not over yet. From 6 to 10 or 11 or 12, however, do that other thing. That's what I did with CFA. So when I was taking CFA, I would actually start earlier. So I switched my hours from 9 to 6 down back to 7 to 4. And I had that luxury to start earlier and I could leave earlier. So I made that shift to allow more afternoon hours for myself to work on the business. To prepare for the CFA. And when I did that, I created a mental commitment to like 4 o'clock, I'm not going home. I wasn't going home. I would barricade myself in the boardroom. That was pre-COVID days, so we all had access to a workspace. I would barricade myself in the boardroom and I would have a textbook and I would learn CFA until the office would shut down the air conditioner and they'll shut off the lights. And then at that time, around 9 o'clock, I'll have to leave. And on the subway back home, I'll still be on my laptop or on my phone, or I would have physical printouts where I would read materials. And then when I get home at 9 o'clock, I would have dinner and I would still do maybe a little quiz or a mock test. And then around 11, I would relax and I would say, okay, the day is over. But that's something you had to really force yourself to do. So I had a time constraint, because CFA, you need to book ahead of the time and the exam date is very clear. So now you're working against the clock to get yourself prepared for that. Again, creating these sorts of boundaries is really helpful, but you can also do it another way. You can wake up earlier. If you're I'm not a morning person. I hate mornings. I would rather stay up at 1 o'clock in the morning than wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm fine with that. But if you're a morning person, you can wake up at 4 or 5. Nobody's around. The world hasn't started yet. And so you have beautiful 4 or 5, 3 hours to just do your thing, do your market research, figure out what product you want to sell, figure out how you want to sell it, take a course if you need to, maybe, learn online about social media marketing and social selling and all that. And then go to do your job. You got a 1 hour lunch break, which a lot of people just waste, chatting at the water cooler, or, going for lunch and just take the whole hour lunch on their phone on social media. Don't do that. Maybe eat at your desk while you're working and then use that hour to, again, do some work for your new business. And then when your job is done, maybe another hour, and then at 7 o'clock, you're home with your family. But there is no way, like, it's not just going to happen to you. You really need to have that mental commitment.
That is a very thorough, in-depth answer. I certainly appreciate it. Some people are not in the same position as would a young person, like you mentioned, with no prior commitment. So, trying to integrate that ambition that you have into your daily life, that's another way to do it, for sure. So you also mentioned you taught yourself how to code. How was that? Are you a person who's generally gravitating towards technical details and technical work, so you certainly like it, or did you force yourself to learn how to code?
I never forced myself to learn anything in my life, and that's probably the biggest takeaway or highlight I want to make for everybody listening, is that, look, if you're not passionate about Mandarin language, don't force yourself just because you think that 2 billion people will speak Mandarin by 2045 or whatever, and you need to really be one of them for business purposes. Don't do that to yourself. Like, if you're not passionate about doing anything, there's no chance that you're actually going to get there, because there's all kinds of excuses and other better things to do. I was fortunate in the sense that, I was always interested in this. I just never took the step before to actually do it. And so when I started coding, it was really interesting to me to understand the process of putting together a landing page and creating like a script that will allow for, a collection of email address and then maybe automate certain parts of my business. And so when I started watching it, I was fascinated. You couldn't stop me from doing that. I would be sitting here and it would be like 2 or 3 in the morning and I would still put together, I would still be coding HTML and then CSS, and then you learn JavaScript, and then you start, more advanced databases and, cloud and AI. But really it came down to just natural curiosity. So are you naturally curious to pick up this, right? Are you and again, you could have a barrier in the form of, say you're really passionate about real estate, but you can only read this much. Sometimes you need to, taste it. Sometimes you need to go and make a couple of deals. You want to buy a property, sell a property, lease a property, just have your hands dirty to really understand what goes into the valuation and transactional side of things. You can read this, but the passion really comes down to, okay, maybe you want to reach out to somebody, ask for an internship or apprenticeship or get somebody as a mentor. That sort of initiative comes from, a position of genuinely being curious and interested in something. I taught myself how to code by watching YouTube, exactly the same way I taught myself how to speak English. There was no difference. I would just lock myself in the room for 8 hours and I would just keep watching. And then every 30 seconds, I would stop the recording and then I'll look at the screen very close and I'll try to figure out what the hell they're doing, what code they're writing, and then I'll replicate it on my own screen and then try to run it and see if it works out to be the same thing. And if it's not the same thing, what's the difference? So it was genuine interest in learning. And, it's, to me, again, I'm different from other people, but propensity to learn and desire to learn is something that I never really had a problem with. And so it's just a matter of, can I also make money out of the skill set that I'm learning? And that's awesome. That put me in a really good position to be genuinely enticed and incentivized to do.
Yeah, man, curiosity is really important. It's like if you want to force yourself to learn something, maybe the first few weeks it's going to work, but then over time you start burning out, right? Because you really aren't attracted to absorbing more of that knowledge. Another problem that I find a lot of people have, including myself sometimes, is the ability to just simply sit down and focus, given how much distraction is around us these days. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with shutting off or muting the distractions around you?
Constantly getting distracted. I was actually talking to my girlfriend about that yesterday, where, I wish I just had a to-do list and somebody really just telling me, hey, go do these 10 things. And I'm really good at doing it. Right. But the moment you let your mind wander and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. And here's 10 reasons for not doing it today, or maybe it's not a good day, or maybe they're busy or whatever. You don't want to bother them on the holiday. When it comes to client outreach or building, book of business, you kind of end up playing against yourself. Your brain finds these security mechanisms to kind of keep you from taking risks, right? That's what the brain is for, is to prevent you from, really dying. But sometimes it's also the psychological risk that, you're talking yourself out of taking. What I try to do is, I try to just act without thinking too much. So I would have my time when I would sit down, I'll strategize. I'll say, okay, for me to get clients, here's, the 3 things I should be doing. I can also try these other 2 things, and they might not be the perfect solution this week, but I'll learn something. I'll try other strategies. And then there's this day when you just wake up and you have a list and you do it. And you don't stop until you're done, because the moment you stop and start thinking too much about it is when when it's the easiest to sort of say, okay, you know what, maybe tomorrow, or I've already done too much. No, just go through your list, make it into, I almost wish this is a nerdy part of me talking, but I love video games. So any game that you play that's like a quest and you need to complete a quest, and it's go here, talk to this person, then go here, do this, and then you're done. You get a reward. maybe like experience points or coins or whatever. I apply the same approach to my business. I'm thinking, okay, what if this was a game and this was a quest? Me reaching out to 10 people asking for their business. It could be a quest, and I'm just completing it. There's no emotion. Like I'm not emotionally attached to a video game, and I'm not emotionally thinking about why I shouldn't be doing this. So why should I do the same for my business? If I almost gamify the whole thing, that maybe I can get through. The other thing that I just tend to do is just work with other people. So I realize this again, everybody's different. And I encourage everybody listening to sort of just ask yourself, how are you doing it for, like, what works best for you? What works best for me is very small periods of self-isolation and deep thought, and more prolonged periods of working with other people in the same room. So like during short periods of self-isolation, I can do my thinking, and then with other people, I can just do my doing. And that allows me to, get the job done, because when I'm with other people, I see they're working, they're asking me, how are you doing? I know I need to do stuff, and then I go home, right? So creating that model around figuring out what makes you productive, what makes your output high. Are you working in the morning because that's when your brain works best, or are you working in the evening because you don't get as many distractions? Try different things. Wake up early, wake up late. Try things. Delegation versus doing it yourself versus maybe automating it with technology, or there's all kinds of ways to do it, but you need to figure out your own way that works for you.
Yeah, that's good advice for sure. So taking action rather than allowing. So by taking action, you kind of override the potential for your mind to become distracted. That was your first point. And then what I really liked is you said gamifying things. So you act like you're in a video game. You're on a quest to accomplish a certain mission, and that's definitely interesting. Solitude, I'm extremely for. I think all of us need some time to get back into our own caves and regroup and get back to the drawing board. Understand what needs to be done next, and obviously group work. So yeah, that's really good points, man. I know that you mentioned.
Does any of that, what I said, resonate with your own way that you're building your business? And maybe tell me a little bit about, like, has anything that I said sort of, did you go like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing? Or were you like, nah, but here's how I'm a pro? Like, I'm just curious, like, how are you how would you answer yourself, some of these questions that you asked?
One of the closest things to what you mentioned in terms of what I do is that solitude and that moment of thinking, which for me comes through meditation. And I noticed that when I'm very flustered, especially in the beginning of the day, when my mind is all over the place, in order to hone in and focus on what actually needs to be done, I either have to write down all the things that I need to do, so it's out of my mind and I'm less scatter-minded, or sit down maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just become a little grounded, because you wake up, you're like, oh, I'm all over the place. Yeah, exactly, right? But then you kind of just ground yourself, you hone in, and everything seems to be a little calmer. Everything seems to dial down a bit. So that's really what I do.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I was nodding furiously for those of you that are just listening on the podcast, because that's exactly what I'm doing as well. Wake up all over the place, all kinds of the first instinctive thing to do, check my phone, check my email. Oh my God, people were emailing me. I need to get out. I need to run, no breakfast, no sort of like collect yourself plan for the day. Just like skip that part, run, react. I don't like reacting to things. I like thinking proactively. And then, at some point, if I got two priorities colliding, I want to be strategic about, okay, like, do I go after this, which seems very urgent, but not important? Or do I want to go after something that's maybe urgent and important, or maybe important, but not, immediately? Or like, there's all things but sometimes you just need time, right? You just need that solitude. So I agree with you.
Yeah, this important and urgent kind of graph or axis, I recall that from Stephen Covey as well. He always says in his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, he's like, write down all of the things that you need to do and figure out which ones are urgent and which ones are important. Work on the ones that are both important and urgent, right? But if it's not urgent, but it's just very important, then it's kind of a more long-term task that you need to accomplish. So make sure that that's at the top of your list as well. anyways, shout out to Stephen Covey. If anyone hasn't read his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People,
Yeah.
definitely recommend that. You mentioned something else which resonated with me, checking your phone in the beginning of the day and also being reactive. I noticed I'm generally a reactive person, and I'd like to backtrack that. I want to turn that into being more proactive. And I think one of the ways to do it is, again, through mindfulness, right? Through just recognizing that, am I doing this because I want to do it, or am I really doing it without any intention? I just want to jump on that.
Well, what you're saying is you're describing like this, situation that a lot of people can relate to, which is it's always easier to follow somebody else's path that other people sort of. And again, what I mean by that is whether that's somebody asking you for a favor and somebody asking you a question, or like the things that come to you. It's for your brain. It's easier to execute on those instead of thinking what I should do, right? Because the task in front of you, when somebody says, hey, Reza, can you help me with this? It's very clear what you need to do. It's clear who the person that's asking and what the expectation is and the output. And you kind of already know how to do it anyway. So you're just doing it. And it's very easy just to do it. And you may feel productive because you say, well, I solved that important email and, it's done. And now I don't have to worry about it. But sometimes it's kind of like, okay, but what should I really be doing now? Like if I didn't have this email, what would I do? And sometimes it's like, well, I need to grow my business, right? Instead of maybe executing in the business, you want to grow your business. And to do that, sometimes it takes 3-4 hours of concentration and just brain activity and maybe uncomfortable actions like calling people or emailing people. And it's harder. It's much easier to execute on the tasks that somebody asks you for than to put yourself outside of the comfort zone and then do something that nobody's asking you to. And sometimes people are not even appreciating you reaching out. So you get like a complete reverse reaction. This way you get appreciation, this way you get anger. But what's really good for you is the second one, because you're growing your business.
Yeah,
I
man.
find that
That's
fascinating.
so true. That's so true. It's like when no one is telling you to do something, there is no external factor pushing you to do it. It takes a lot of vision and also a lot of inspiration and a lot of perseverance to push through those draining kind of feelings once in a while. So definitely with you there. By the way, I know you mentioned that you created some startups in the tech and the business field, right? So I wanted to know, well, I was curious, what sorts of companies did you have experience with, finding?
Yeah, so sorry, one second. My
Phone is when I started, on the tech path, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So the first company really came out of this idea of creating a better office environment for people in the creative and tech roles. And really the inspiration came from my own cubicle that I hated. And I thought there must be a better way for people to work in the office. And so my friend and I wanted to start a co-working space before WeWork was even a thing. It was 2015. Nobody was really thinking about WeWork, or other co-working spaces weren't that big. And a lot of people were doing hoteling for consultants, but for full-time employees there was no flexible work arrangement. And so we wanted to create a future of office. That's what we want. We wanted to create a future of office, and it was really expensive to do. And for two kids that just graduated from college, putting in $500,000 in leasehold improvements and furniture, and just wasn't feasible, at least at that time. And we got a government loan a government grant and a bank loan to do it, but it was still too much of a personal guarantee and personal financial commitment to execute. So, but from that experience, we sort of started working on a series of real estate related applications, and we were, selling real estate brokers on a better process to find and service their clients. We were working on a 3D sort of like this whole platform where you can book a tour and tour a space virtually without ever going to an office to tour. And again, that was before COVID, so normally you would go downtown and a broker will walk you around the space and explain what's what. And then, we really felt like that was going to disappear because of just, how much commitment in terms of time all that was taking. And then we, decided leaving real estate for, because of the certain issues we got in legal fights with another company in the States. And so, we had to leave that industry and then start doing something else. So, over the course of several years, we ended up starting a venture capital tech company, which was essentially connecting entrepreneurs with the partners of venture capital firms on the premise of fit for their portfolio. So if you're building a real estate company, we'll tell you who the investors are in like real estate tech, and then connect you with the email and LinkedIn, and you would basically use our marketplace to find investors to pitch your business. Then we also worked on so we sold that company to for a very small amount, but it was still an exit. That we sold that company to another VC tech company in Canada. Worked there for a couple of months, maybe about 6 to 9 months. We worked there. I ended up leaving, and I joined as a co-founder. I joined a alternative finance, like an alternative lending startup that they were focusing on, helping people that can't qualify for a bank loan to still get a loan to get a mortgage, basically. And we were building that marketplace that connected mortgage brokers and mortgage lenders. And it's called alternative lending. And ended up growing from $0 to $2 billion in lending capital available on the platform. And I was responsible for creating a platform in the marketplace from scratch, again using the coding skills that I taught myself a couple of years back. Essentially build a whole marketplace from scratch without a single developer on the team other than me and my friend. And we did that together, built a marketplace and grew the platform to $2 billion. The company just went through an incubator in Montreal called Fintech Cadence Ascension 2021, and they're on track to raise venture capital. So, but when the COVID started, I really looked around, and I was doing some consulting work, and that went to zero. People just decided not to spend any money when the COVID hit in March 2020, and really looked around, and I wanted to understand what I want to do, and do I want to be part of another startup? Do I want to do something else? How am I going to pay my bills? And at that time, I was more and more trying to restart my own solopreneur journey. Because I learned so much, and at some companies I wasn't agreeing with founders on sales, and then other company I wasn't agreeing with founders on product, and I really wanted to do something where I don't need to disagree with anyone because I'm the only person responsible for everything. And so decided to relaunch CoSquare in May 2020. Went through a series of pivots, culminating around January or February 2021, where we finally rebuilt CoSquare as a company that provides sort of like incorporation services for startups, and that's what I'm working on right now.
That is a long and definitely adventurous journey that you went through. I want to know what's the inspiration, or how do you come up with these ideas? Is it out of a personal need, or do you figure that there actually is a big gap in the market, and that's what you want to go for? Or is it, let's say, something that you're passionate about? What is that?
So it's both. Definitely both. When we started real estate, the first ever company that I told you we didn't work out as well as we hoped for, we went down and we toured, because at that time what we knew is we wanted to start a company, but we didn't know what company we wanted to start. So we were looking for like an office space for ourselves to sort of work together. And it was me and my college friend, Sajad. We wanted to start a business, but every office space was just so expensive and so boring. I mean, talking about Regis and all these big companies that manage a lot of like freelance remote offices, it was a very like white walls, desk in the middle of it, and nothing really, just nothing, no community. And again, that was before COVID, and we were really that was before WeWork, and we were really thinking, can we create community? Can we host events? Can we provide some sort of food or drinks on tap, and people can come in and really feel like they're not in the stuffy corporate office, but more of a just like a place to work and hang out and meet other people and have fun while working. And again, before we worked, so we were ahead of our time. But that came from a position of just personally wanting something better for ourselves. We wanted to be consumers of our own product, and that's why we wanted to do it. Fast forward to alternative lending startup that I was brought on as a co-founder and a product officer. I didn't know anything about lending. I never had a mortgage. It wasn't something that I like, oh yeah, it goes like it.
Yeah.
I can totally see, but based on the expertise of other people on the team and in the room, I could really delegate to them that vision of, okay, yeah, I see people don't qualify for bank loans, and where are they going to go? Are they going to, there's all kinds of like scammy outlets for financing, and we wanted to create something very transparent. And there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money in the ecosystem looking for these sorts of people, but there is no technology and no marketplace to connect the two. So I understood it from a product perspective. Somebody else understood it from an opportunity perspective. And then we just, we started coding and building and commercializing, and it made more and more sense. The more, the further I sort of went with the team, the more and more I realized, oh, wow, this really is an opportunity, because, people were just coming and signing up, and there's nothing else on the market like that. So, and then, the latest, startup idea that I'm working on, the incorporation, really came down to my personal experience. I mean, incorporating, let me tell you a little bit. So I want to give a little bit of a context on what the options are right now in the market. So if you're starting a business, say you want to start selling online, or you want to create a consulting company, or you are creating a tech startup, you've got really two options as of today. You can either go to a law firm, and the billable hour model works the way that lawyers charge per hour. The usual rate is $250 to $500 an hour, and you go there and say, I want to incorporate, and they book you in. You come in, you bring all the papers, they ask you questions, they fill out these forms, they charge $500 an hour for that, and then they file an incorporation, and then maybe a week later you get a package in your mail, and that's or you have to go and pick it up personally from a law firm office, and they charge you maybe $2,000 or $3,000, and you get your incorporation, you get your business number, you get your GST, HST, you get everything you need, minute book, all the documents. Or, and it's an expensive service, but generally speaking, you're covered for whatever needs you have. And then the second option is to do it yourself. So you go online, you type in, I want to incorporate, there is a government link. You can go on the government website. They ask you a bunch of questions, how many shares you want, how many directors are in the business. And at that time, you're like, how many shares do I want? How do I know how many shares do I want? How do I know the share classes? How do I understand the whole what's the difference between directors and shareholders and officers? And, just so many questions that, nobody's explaining to you, but it's an option. So you can still follow that flow, and you can do it yourself and hope that you did it right. And it doesn't come back to haunt you later when you decide to, raise capital, and then investors come on and take a look, and you're like, what the hell is this? You're half incorporated, or whatever. And the crazy part is that when you do yourself through the government, they don't give you the legal package that the law firm would provide you. So the bylaws, director resolutions, the cap table, even issuing shares, nobody's giving you a certificate like
one they have right there, saying, hey, Vadim, you own 500,000 shares of this company you just incorporated.
Oh, by the way, that constitutes 100% of ownership. So technically you own the company. That doesn't happen. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they incorporate a business, they don't even own their business because there is no paper trail to attribute their ownership back to the company. And so that's where I was just like, wait a minute, there is definitely an opportunity. I've been an entrepreneur for the past 6 years. I've done my own incorporation myself, but I went an extra step to really research and understand what's needed to incorporate. My first ever, I was fortunate. One of my good friends is a corporate lawyer on Bay Street, so he helped me free of charge to do it. I had the paperwork that I knew I needed, and it was quality and it was done right. And then I said, wait a minute, can I not automate this whole thing? Is there really no way for technology not to cost $2,000-$3,000 in billable hours, but still provide the lawyer quality incorporation? And that's when I started CoSquare, is when I said, look, for $149, at that time it was a little bit cheaper, but the price right now is $149. You can come to us, you tell us who the co-founders are, what the share breakdown that you want. You tell us a little bit of names of each person, and you tell us what you want to call your company, and we'll do the name search. We'll reserve the company name. We register your company with the federal government. We provide you the full list of legal paperwork, so you don't have to worry about it. And then you just move on with your life, and that all costs a fraction of what you would normally pay the lawyer. So that came from my personal pain as an entrepreneur, but also realizing that there is a market opportunity. And if I am the person that went through that, and I have been doing this for 6 years, imagine somebody starting out today for the first time. You have to really want to do research and read about the legal requirements of starting a company. Most of the people don't do that, right? So we wanted to create very simple, very straightforward, very affordable way for entrepreneurs to get started without getting too hooked up on their, legal minutia and overpaying to lawyers, which is, another thing that I never wanted another entrepreneur to ever do again.
Yeah, so the traditional path would really look like you either pay a lot of money or there is important information that falls between the cracks and you won't realize it. It's going to go over your head.
You would take a lot of risk. So normally it's fine to just register a business, but then, if the audit ever happens, so the auditor comes back and says, hey, I want to see a paper trail of who owns your business and how the decision, so there's company minutes. I don't know if you heard that term before, board resolutions, board meetings. Every board meeting needs to have board minutes. Those minutes needs to be documented. It's a very antiquated way that the government requires you to run your business, but there is no way around it. The one way is to have your legal counsel, right, documenting all that, but the other way is to have technology like ours to really automate the whole thing. And so when you're incorporating, we offer a one-time incorporation, but we also offer an ongoing corporate management. So you are protected if you're changing directors, if you're issuing new shares in the future to say an angel investor. We will issue all those. We will create the paper trail to make sure it's official, that you have the record of that investor depositing $500,000 in exchange for 25% of your company. And that's all done. The investor got the shares, the investor gets on the cap table, you pass the director resolution to issue those shares in exchange for capital, and we paper everything. And that's really what the value is just making sure you're not worrying too much about the administrative legal side of things, so that you can grow your business, but also that it doesn't cost you a lot. So you're not taking any risk and you're not overpaying. This is where we want it to operate.
Yeah, that's right in the middle. There's a sweet spot. So for anyone out there who wants to start a business, you guys heard it here first. You need to reach out to Vadim and he'll get it done for you. So Vadim, it's been a real pleasure getting to talk to you, getting to know you and your journey. Really, it's been awesome. Thank you for joining. If there's anything else, by the way, that you wish to talk about, please feel free. But if not, then
well, let me maybe take 30 seconds and just say that in people in your network, I would love to also share something else, which is very quickly, right? Nothing is going to happen right away. It's always the matter of time. And if you're thinking of starting a company, you can almost expect to fail, or you just not fail. Fail is a big word, but you're not going to get it right on the first try. Sometimes you need to ask more questions and you need to dig it a little bit deeper and maybe change things up a couple of times, and eventually you'll get it right. It's not that complicated. It's an opportunity and you provide a solution and somebody needs to pay, somebody wants it and they'll pay for it. Business is really a process of creating value and capturing a percentage of that value as revenue, hopefully, right? And that's what business does: create value and capture that value in the form of revenue. And so, a lot of people say, well, I've tried, or hey, I had this idea and I've tried and nobody wanted it. Well, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you can almost expect that your first idea is not going to work out. Almost take that as a granted. We actually, so I run a podcast called 1:30 a.m. where I interview people about their failures. I talk to people, hey, tell me about your business, but before we sort of get to you, closing $10 million worth of venture capital and getting $100 million in revenue, let's talk about, the 5 years leading up to it, where you had one user and a clunky landing page of a product and you couldn't do anything until this other thing happened to you. But talk to me about that period of time, that stretch where, you spoke with, 500 people and 499 said it's a dumb idea and you shouldn't do it and you should go back to your job and hopefully, they're still going to hire you, and you're like, but no. And then you get that one person to say yes and they become your first client and you make $50 a month off of that client, and then you grow it to $100 a month and $5,000 a month. And so, starting a business is tricky. It's not a linear path. It's a lot of back and forth and going back and going down and going up and, back and, left and right and figuring things out. But just resiliency is really important. I could not overstate the importance of staying in the game. I truly believe that people that succeed in entrepreneurship, you're going to think it's crazy, but I've been observing that for 7 years. And here's what it is. People that succeed as entrepreneurs, they're not the most financially well off. They're not the most well connected. They're not the smartest people. They're just the people that stayed in the game long enough to finally figure out what it takes to start a business. These are the people that adapt. They resist negativity. They are able to think quickly and iterate and not be afraid to admit that they're wrong. You have to be flexible. In the corporate world, maybe you should keep the facade and make sure that people understand that you know what you're doing. In the startup, it's the fastest way to fail is just to think that you're right. I personally think that I'm making wrong decisions almost every day, and that's fine. I learn from it. But keeping the open mind and staying in the game long enough, is that how you succeed in business? I'm just going to leave it at that, Reza.
That's beautiful, man. And I know you also mentioned your podcast, so I'll definitely leave a link there. And I want to listen to a couple of episodes because I saw it on your LinkedIn and I was very interested in the description of the podcast and what it's about. So thanks for bringing that up and thanks for sharing that. We will definitely have that in the link for everyone listening as well. Vadim, it's been a real pleasure, man. Really, really glad that you could come on and join us on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rez. And like I said at the very beginning, big shout out to you for doing this. And I wish nothing but continued success to you with this initiative, as well as the community that's listening. I wish, nothing but the best for everybody. So good luck and stay safe and, keep grinding.
Thank you, sir. Take care.